Hey everyone, and welcome. Every single time we talk, there's something else happening right alongside our words, a kind of secret language. Today, we're diving into the music of our speech.
You've heard it a million times, right? It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And it's so true. But have you ever stopped to think about what happens when that how just vanishes? Like, what if the emotion, the tone, the rhythm of your voice just disappeared? Imagine trying to sound happy or angry or even sad and you just can't. So that's exactly what we're going to break down today. We'll look at how you say it, the sound of emotion, how to spot the signs, the different types, some common mix-ups, and of course, why this all matters so much.
All right, let's jump right in. First up, how you say it. We're talking about that invisible layer of communication.
Okay, so what is this music of our speech? And what's actually happening in the brain when the music just stops?
Well, the official term for this is prosody. You can basically think of it as the melody of your voice. It's the difference between saying great and great. It's the excitement, the sarcasm, the sadness. It's the emotional color we paint our words with. So if prosody is the music, then aprosody is what happens when someone's internal radio goes silent. It's a neurological thing where a person either can't create that emotional tone or they can't hear it in other people's voices. The words come out, but the music's just gone. And this is where it gets really, really cool. You've probably heard of aphasia, right? That's when brain damage, usually on the left side, messes with the words you use, the what. Well, aprosodia is like its perfect mirror image. It's a problem with the how you say things, and it almost always comes from damage to the right side of the brain. It's this incredible example of how the two halves of our brain have totally different jobs.
Okay, so how on earth do you spot something like this? It's not exactly obvious. It really does take some clinical detective work. It really breaks down into 4 key steps. First, doctors just listen. Is their spontaneous speech kind of flat, maybe monotonous? Then they check comprehension. Can the person actually tell the difference between a happy voice and a sad voice? Third, and this is a big one, they look for a mismatch. Do the emotions they say they're feeling line up with the sound of their voice? And lastly, they'll ask them to repeat an emotional phrase to see if they can imitate the tone. This helps figure out exactly what's going on.
And this slide is the perfect example of that mismatch. Just imagine someone saying the words, "I'm feeling very sad," but it comes out sounding all cheerful and bubbly like this. It's a total disconnect between the content of the words and the music of the voice. That's a huge red flag.
And all that detective work is super important because aprosodia is not a one-size-fits-all condition. It can look very, very different depending on what's going on in the brain. So, believe it or not, there are actually 8 clinical types. But to really get a handle on this, we're just going to focus on the 2 big ones, motor aprosodia and sensory aprosodia. Comparing them really shows you the range. Okay, so look at this breakdown. They're like polar opposites. With motor aprosodia, the person's voice is monotonous, flat. But, and this is the crazy part, they can totally understand the emotions in your voice just fine. Now, flip that for sensory aprosodia. Their own voice might sound completely normal, but they can't understand the emotion in what you're saying. That's where you get that wild mismatch we were talking about, which you just don't get with the motor type.
And this, wow, this quote really brings it home. It's from a patient with motor aprosodia, and it just shows you how devastating this can be. She was trying to discipline her kids. She felt angry, but she couldn't sound angry. Her voice was just flat. Can you imagine that frustration? She actually had to start saying, "I am angry, and I mean it." But even then, the words came out with no emotional weight at all.
Now, because this is all about the subtle stuff, it's really easy to confuse aprosodia with other conditions. So let's talk about what it isn't. So just to hammer this point home one more time, aphasia is a problem with what is said, the words. Aprosodia is a problem with how it's said, the emotional tone. This is another really important distinction. Someone with motor aprosodia might sound flat, but inside, they're feeling everything. All the emotions are there, they just can't get them out through their voice. That is completely different from something called flattened affect, where a person actually reports feeling nothing. With aprosodia, the internal emotional world is still totally active. Okay, we've gone through all the clinical stuff, but let's bring it back. Why does this matter? What's the real impact on a person's life? So, what are the big things to remember? First, This is almost always caused by a lesion in the right side of the brain, usually from a stroke. Second, the impact on a person's life and their relationships can be huge, even if it's not immediately obvious. And finally, there is hope. Speech therapy can actually help people learn new ways to communicate and compensate, like that mother who had to literally say, "I am angry."
And that really brings us right back to where we started. It makes you think, doesn't it? How much of what we really say to each other is never actually spoken in words, but is carried in that invisible music of our voice.